Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I've made a video on altimeter settings and I've shared the questions in the end of the video. I hope you enjoy it. In case you have any doubts, any questions, please comment below so that I can help you with them. And do not forget to share, subscribe and like my video. Now we'll talk about altimeter settings. What is an altimeter? So altimeter is nothing but an instrument that tells you the altitude of the aircraft. So जो altimeter है वो एक instrument है, ओके जो आपको बताता है कि आपका एयरक्राफ्ट कहाँ पे फ्लाई कर रहा है, किस ऑल्टीट्यूड पे फ्लाई कर रहा है. और वो मेजर क्या करता है, वो मेजर करता है प्रेशर. सो इट लुक्स समवॉट लाइक दिस. अलग अलग एयरक्राफ्ट में डिफरेंट टाइप के वेज होंगे जिसमें आपको ऑल्टीट्यूड पता चलेगा. दिस इज़ द कन्वेंशनल, दिस इज़ व्हाट हैपन्स इन एयरबस. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पे आपको ये ऑल्टीमीटर दिखाता है. ठीक है, दे विल टेल यू कि आप कौन से लेवल पर हो. तो ये आपको ऑल्टीमीटर ये है जो आपको बताएगा कि आप किस ऑल्टीट्यूड पे हो. और ये जो सेटिंग है ना, ये है आपकी प्रेशर सेटिंग, जिसके बारे में हम इस पूरे वीडियो में समझेंगे. ठीक है, सो दिस इज व्हाट वी नीड टू फोकस ऑन. सो दिस इज ऑल्सो एन ऑल्टीमीटर विच विल टेल यू कि विच ऑल्टीट्यूड यू आर फ्लाइंग. सो वी सेट अ पर्टिकुलर प्रेशर. We know as we climb the pressure will reduce, lapse rate है, so the pressure will reduce. So the altimeter will show the altitude of the aircraft above the pressure that we have set. तो अगर if I set a pressure, maybe you can say that I have set a pressure 1013, that is your ISA pressure main sea level पे. So if I set this pressure and now I am going higher and higher, my aircraft is flying higher and higher, so every time it's going 30 feet higher, like we studied in the previous chapter, that 1 hectopascal is reduced as you climb 30 feet, right? So this is your pressure lapse rate. So as I go higher and higher, so every 30 feet my pressure will go down by 1 hectopascal. Let's see how that works. So if right now I am at a level where the pressure is 1000 hectopascal. Now I have gone 30 feet higher. Now my pressure here, when my aircraft has reached this stage, now the pressure would be 999 hectopascal. It will reduce by 1 hectopascal because that is the lapse rate. Now I go even higher, okay, by 30 more feet. So now this is total 60 feet. Now my pressure will be 998 hectopascal. So every 30 feet I go higher, my pressure is dropped by 1 hectopascal, which is the lapse rate, which is given by the International Standard Atmosphere, ISA. So if I set this as my standard value, which is also known as datum. So if I set this on my altimeter, which is the instrument which measures the pressures and gives you the altitude. So if I set this, so my altimeter will now measure as per this. So every 30 feet I go higher from this level, my pressure will drop by 1 hectopascal for every 30 feet. So if I am at this level now, if I am here and my datum is also 1000 hectopascal, what will my altimeter read? It will read 0 feet. Why? Because there is no difference. It's set on 1000 and I'm also flying on 1000 hectopascal. So I have not gone either 30 feet higher or 30 feet lower. So here my altimeter will read 0 if I am at the same level. If I go lower, then it will, every 30 feet I descend. Here I was climbing. Now if I descend by 30 feet, it will increase by 1 hectopascal. So जो datum है, that can be anything that we can set on the altimeter to get the altitude from that datum. So I can set any pressure value जिससे I want to compare now from this pressure value where my aircraft is. So there are different settings known as Q codes. Let us understand what are these different settings. So these Q codes are basically your pressure datums that we set in our altimeter. Now we'll understand the difference between what is height, what is elevation and what is altitude. So this we need to understand. Now let us understand before that the Q codes. So there are 3 Q codes that are very, very important. One is QNH, QFE and QNE. So there is no full form. These are just pressure datums that we use. So when we talk about, for example, if we are in any kind of a city, any city you can say XYZ. Now there is a main sea level in that city. So this would be QNH. And obviously, like for example, if you talk about any city which is near to the water body like Mumbai or Chennai, so now the runway is built on some kind of elevation. It is not built over water, right? So there is some kind of an elevation. So it could be any kind of an elevation. So this would be considered as an elevation where your runway is made. It's not a hill. I'm just drawing it like that. So for example, this is your runway, right? So your runway is at some elevation. That elevation could be anything depending on different cities. Now your aircraft is flying here or is flying at the same level somewhere ahead. Now this pressure would be different as compared to this pressure because it's on an elevation. So every 30 feet you lose 1 hectopascal. So for example, if this was maybe 30 feet only, so if the pressure here was 100, then pressure here would be 999 because every 30 feet it drops by 1 hectopascal. These are just the example values that I'm giving you. So when you measure your aircraft's altitude from QFE is, you could learn that as field elevation. So pressure at field elevation. So when you measure the aircraft altitude or the height from QFE, that vertical distance is known as height. When you measure the aircraft's vertical distance from QNH, which is your mean sea level pressure at that city at that particular day in real life, then your vertical distance is known as altitude. So this is very important. So now you could write the definitions somewhat like, so basically you could say that height, what is height? It is the vertical distance from ground, right? So from the runway, that is on the airport. What is altitude? It is the vertical distance again of aircraft from mean sea level, and that is measured from QNH setting. So these settings are just pressure settings. So field elevation or QFE setting is the setting of the pressure that is there on the runway that day or on the airport that day. That is after the elevation, right? And QNH is your mean sea level setting of that area or the city. So QNH would be different for different cities because everywhere the mean sea level is different, right? So this is there. So this is height, this is altitude. Now let's understand all this in this diagram, which is very, very important to understand. And what is elevation? So elevation is, if you want to define elevation, it is basically the vertical distance of a fixed point. It's fixed, it cannot be moved. Fixed point above mean sea level. Now this fixed point could be a mountain, it could be a hill, it could be a plain surface, it could be a valley or anything. So it's a fixed point above mean sea level. So now let's understand the very, very important diagram that is here, which is very well drawn. So this is your QNH, which is the mean sea level pressure. From here, when you are measuring the vertical distance of the aircraft, is known as altitude. When you are measuring it from QFE, which is from your airport level or the basically from the elevation, in that case when you are measuring this aircraft's vertical distance, it is known as height. Now there is something very, very important, that is QNE. And why is it important? From here when you measure the aircraft vertical distance, it is either flight level or you could also say pressure altitude. It is known as both. Normally in real life we'll be using flight levels. So flight level is measured from QNE. QNE is also a pressure setting, but QNE is a fixed value. It is the standard value that is given by ISA, right, which is 1013.25 hectopascal. So now this is very, very important. So this setting is the standardized setting. Like I have told you in my first video of atmosphere, that we need to calibrate our instruments in a way so that if my aircraft is flying from Delhi to maybe United Nations, or it is flying to Mumbai, or it is flying to Gulf countries, anywhere. So in that case I need to know that where I am as in respect to the standard set value, because the other aircrafts are also flying on that set values. if I'm taking off from maybe Delhi today, so I'll set initially QNH. So I would want to know where my aircraft is, what is my elevation of that city for that example. But after I cross Delhi, I'm out of Delhi, I'm going from Delhi to Mumbai, right? So this is, now I have crossed Delhi. Now from here till I enter Mumbai, maybe I'm entering Mumbai somewhere here. So from here to here, I need to fly on a standard value, that is QNE. Why? Because now all the aircrafts around would be flying in that standard value. So if I set a different datum in my altimeter and they set a different datum on their altimeter, there's a risk of collision. So that is where this is important. This is a standard value that needs to be set. Now let us write all the definitions so that it becomes even more clear. So now the setting is QFE, QNH and QNE, right? So I've written the definitions for you. So QFE is the atmospheric pressure which is observed on the aerodrome. So that is your field elevation. How do we know the pressure on the aerodrome? Of course, there is a instrument that is there on the aerodrome to measure. That is known as barometer. So barometer basically is an instrument which is there on the aerodrome to measure the pressure. Okay. Then QNH is the definition says atmospheric pressure at the aerodrome reduced to mean sea level using ISA values and lapse rate. What is the lapse rate? The lapse rate is every 30 feet you go higher, you lose 1 hectopascal, and every 30 feet you go lower, you gain 1 hectopascal. That's the lapse rate, right? Now in this case, what does this definition really say is, let me explain it here. For example, this is my elevation and my elevation is maybe 90 feet. Okay. Now here is my runway, for example, on this airport. Now this elevation is 90 feet. So I can, with the help of barometer, I know that what is the pressure here. Say the pressure here is 1000 hectopascal today, right? Now I know the elevation is 90 feet. The pressure is this. The elevation is this. Can I tell my mean sea level pressure now? Can I tell my QNH? That is reduced with the help of ISA values. So 90 feet, that means 90 by 30, which is 3. So that means my hectopascal will increase by 1003 by 3 value, because I am going 3 times 30 feet lower. So my hectopascal increases by 3 hectopascal. So now my QNH is this. So this is what it is saying here basically in the definition. Now you read the definition again, you will understand. Now QNE is the altimeter subscale setting of this. So you can put the exact value or you could just put this for the calculation purpose like we normally use. So this is the standard value by the ISA. Now this is how it works. So all the questions that you will get is somewhat basically they'll give you QFE and they'll tell you to calculate QNH with the help of elevation. They'll give you QNH, they'll tell you to calculate QFE if they will give you the elevation. So this is how you keep on calculating. Now what is more important is, for example, now this is your main sea level maybe. Okay, now here maybe on the elevation of you could say 600 feet. Okay, now here is the runway. So obviously the QFE here would be something and here it would be QNH. So QNH we need to find out. QFE is given to be 990 hectopascal, right? So now we need to find the QNH. How will we find? We know what is QFE, we know what is this. So we can just simply calculate how many feet are there. So 600 by 30 will give me a value which is 20 hectopascal. So I am every 30 feet I go higher, it reduces 1 hectopascal, and every 30 feet I'll go lower, it'll increase. So when I add 20 hectopascal to 990, I get QNH would be 20 plus 990, which will give me 1010 hectopascal. So my QNH is 1010 hectopascal. Now this is one type of question that can come. The other question is, for example, condition 1, very important to understand. Condition 1, if my aircraft is on ground and altimeter datum is set to QFE. Now when my aircraft is on the ground and my altimeter is set to QFE, which is this pressure, what will my altimeter read? It will give me 0 feet, right? Because I am here, my aircraft is here, my setting is also the same. So there will be no altitude change, there will be no height given, right? So it will be 0 feet. Now the second condition is condition number 2. Now my aircraft is on ground again, okay, but my altimeter is set to QNH. Now my setting is this, okay, so I have set this now in the altimeter and my aircraft is here, okay. So what will my altitude be? So now it will measure from here and that will be nothing but your elevation, that is 600 feet. It will measure this altitude, right, from QNH. So it would be 600 feet. So this is very important to understand. Now the last part of this topic is, and we'll be done with that topic. So when do we use QNH and when do we use QNE? So QNE is a standard value. QNH is based on every city. So there is something called as transition altitude. Okay. So transition altitude says that below transition altitude you are flying as per the terrain. That is basically in Delhi there could be different terrain. In Mumbai the terrain would be different. In Srinagar terrain will be different. So there is a transition altitude. So below, when you are below the transition altitude, we use QNH of that particular city, and when we are above the transition altitude, we change it to QNE. This is how it works. Because if you don't change it to QNE and you fly as per maybe Delhi, then the other aircraft is flying as per this, so you both might be on the same altitude or the level, but your aircraft will be showing different level because of the different setting in your altimeter. So that could lead to collision. So this is very important. So below transition altitude we use QNH of that city. All the aircrafts in that city would be using QNH, and as soon as you cross that altitude you come to QNE. And what does QNH read? QNH reads your altitude. So when we talk to ATC we mention altitude when we are on QNH setting, and when we are on QNE setting we talk about flight level. Alright, so here the topic ends and I hope you enjoyed the class. So now these are the questions that you need to do. These are questions from IC Joshi's book. So attempt all these questions. Let me know in the comment section. There are more. I'm going to that. So here are the other sets. The answers also given. Please do it without looking at the answers. Now if you see, there are certain questions here where these kind of questions, right? So they come directly as it is in the exam. So to make it easier for you all, I have added a table which you could refer to, take a screenshot. So they're exactly given the answers here. Okay, so you need to remember them. You can always calculate, but it will be easy. So there are like 1 or 2 direct questions that will come. So revise all of that. Alright. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something today. If you have any doubts, please comment below and do not forget to subscribe.